We're at the Louis Miller Museum, and we are interviewing veterans as part of our military series. Would you please tell us your name?
Joe Slavis.
And where do you live, Joe?
I live in Woodbridge Heights right now, the senior citizen complex.
All right, and could you tell us what you did before you went to the service?
Well, I was born and brought up in Hoosick Falls, and I graduated from Hoosick, the old Walter A. Wood High School in 1940.
I see.
And during the summer, vacation, worked on farms and stuff back then during the Depression. It was a little bit hard. And I worked different farms, and I worked in the woods with my father. And yeah.
And then what happened? You got drafted, or?
Well, after I graduated, I went to work in Noble Woods. And I wound up working in the foundry as a core maker. And the war started, and I got what they call a 2B deferment for defense.
I see.
So here I'm 21, around 21, and I see these guys being drafted, married with children. I said, hey, this is not for me. So I went up to the draft board, and Miss Waddell was in charge of the draft board back then. I said, I got to go with the next draft group. She says, no way. She says, your company got you deferred. Well, I said, how can I get out of it? She said, you see them. I said, what if they don't give it to me? She said, that'll be up to you. I said, then I'll quit. They'll have to take me. Well, anyway, I went back, and Warren Gooden was the boss in the foundry and supervisor there. So I talked to him. He was a World War I veteran.
Yep.
He said, Joe, you'll be sorry. I said, well, I'll be sorry, but I said, look at all these guys going with kids. So he said, you sure you want to go? I said, yep. So in other words, I volunteered to go with a draft group.
I see.
That was in the spring of 43.
I see. The spring of, when was that? In the spring of 43?
May of 43.
May 43, okay.
I was inducted the 15th of May.
Okay, and then what happened?
And then, well, 1st of June I went on active duty, and I was taken, reception center was Camp Upton at Long Island, New York.
Yeah, right.
So we got processed and all that. Then, well, a bunch of us in town went that day and wound up at Camp Upton, and then we wound up at Camp Campbell, Kentucky for our basic training. And we went into at that time, this outfit was the 20th Armored Division. They were a training outfit. I was in an Armored Infantry Battalion, Armored Infantry Company. So after basic training ended, sometime in August or so, they turned the division over to a combat division. So we figured, well, we had to go for full training for combat duty. And so we trained. Well, after basic, I got a furlough. I come home, and that's when I celebrated my 22nd birthday. Yeah, 43, yep. And so we're back, and then we trained until March as a unit, the whole division.
That's March of...
March of 44.
March of 44. Go ahead.
And March of 44, evidently the big push was going to come on, and June 6th for the invasion of Europe.
Yeah.
So they hauled. In the meantime, in January of 44, I was made a sergeant. Right. And so in end of February, first part of March, all the privates and PFCs were taken out and shipped to Fort Meade, Maryland, to be shipped over to England to boost up all the divisions over there for the invasion, D-Day. And the non-coms had to stay and rebuild another outfit. I say non-coms, that's non-commissioned officers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry.
So that happened to us. We got in a bunch of people that were college kids, and they were went in for the Air Corps training for Air Corps cadets.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't want them at that time because they wanted everybody in for ground troops, you know. Anyway, we got a new division going. And then we trained.
You were training infantrymen or armored?
We were armored infantry.
I see.
That was a glorified name, but I mean, we rode in half-track. See, just like the Germans called their infantry Panzer Grenadiers.
I see.
And we were just plain armored infantry.
I see. I meant you were in the infantry, but they put you on a,
on a
half track.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right.
It was an armored division.
All right.
Consisted of battalions of armored infantry, 3 battalions of armored infantry. Then you had your tanks and your engineers and your artillery and all that in an armored division.
Okay. So then what happened? You trained this new group.
Well, we trained a new group, and then the end of 44, we got word that we're going to go over.
Overseas.
D-Day happened June 6th of 44, so we still completed our training, and about the middle of January of 45, we went overseas and landed in France. And in France, we regrouped.
When was that you get in there?
We left here about the middle of January. We were over in France about the 1st of February, or early February 45.
I see.
And so then we had to get all our armor stuff cleaned up because we took our own equipment with us instead of picking it up over there.
I see.
And so we had our rifles, cosmolines, and we had to clean all that stuff up. And then, I don't know when it was, but we were up on what they called the watch on the Rhine. So we were up there for a little while, and then we crossed the Rhine. Well, anyway, after crossing the watch on the Rhine, we crossed the Rhine with the, everybody there, all the troops and stuff. And from there on, we went all through Germany and I could name a few different places, like Dusseldorf, Germany, and Cologne, and Aachen. We were in Nuremberg.
Did you? Were you a combat? You were in the combat as you pushed ahead.
Oh yeah, we were in combat. Yeah.
I see, and you were pushing ahead, going
Through,
towards Berlin. Yeah.
Right. Well, we didn't go to Berlin.
No, but I'm saying it was part of the.
Yes, we were on the southern end. At the southern end, after we helped capture Munich, Dachau concentration camp was just outside of Munich.
Oh, so you were there.
We helped relieve that.
Yeah.
And I was there, and we had different outfits there with us. So we were an armored division with all our combat infantry and all that, but we spearheaded a regular foot infantry division.
I see.
So then we, after taking Munich, we now grew to Bavaria now, heading towards the Danube, towards Austria. I can't remember the name of the town or nothing.
That's all right.
There.
Well, that's.
But anyway, we crossed the Danube, and I got a big kick because it was around the end of April, first week in May of 45. And they say the Blue Danube, boy, that was just as muddy as can be. The engineers had put up these pontoon bridges that were, the water was over it, but that's how we crossed that.
I see.
And went on through and into Salzburg, Austria. And then the war ended the 8th of May.
I see. And you were, that's an interesting. So you really saw action. You were really in the middle of that campaign.
We were late getting into it, but we got into it.
Got into it. Yeah. That's all right. So then what happened? The war got over.
Well, the war ended,
and
I, like a fool, I got sick. I come down with this amoebic dysentery, which was one of the worst forms of dysentery. And I wound up, the boys in my outfit were having a blast. I was in the hospital from about the middle of May, 45, and I rejoined my outfit at Camp Lucky Strike just outside of Le Havre, coming back to the States in the end of July, towards the last week of July of 45. Because we come back from, I was in the hospital all that time, and we came back from Europe. We landed in the States the day that they dropped the first A-bomb on Japan.
I see.
And we come back because we were supposed to be spearheading the invasion of Japan, my outfit, because we got bloodied a little bit in Europe last 6 months or whatever.
Yeah,
so we were going to be on a big push.
Yeah, you were going to be transferred to go to the Pacific.
Yeah. We were set up to go. Anyway, we landed in Camp Shanks, or port of debarkation. That was on Staten Island. And so everybody was processed there. It took a few days and were shipped back to, like, I went to Fort Dix, and these other people went to Indian Town Gap or wherever they were inducted, And we were given a 30-day furlough. to come home. So anyway, when we landed at Camp Shank, we had a meal, believe me. They had big steaks and they fed and dined us to beat the band. And it was good, real good. First real milk we had and all that in over 6 months, you know. Well, anyway, we come back to Fort Dick. I went to Fort Dick, and I processed and kept squared up with my pay and all that. Come home on a 30-day leave, and I was home when when the war ended, about the 12th of August or something like that. Well, anyway, in 45, I was out one day with the helping this guy. We're coming back on the Hoosick Falls, and the whistles are blown and everything. We stopped. What's going on? Japan just surrendered. Well, that was good.
That was good news.
Good news, beautiful news. Anyway, after my furlough, 30-day furlough was up, went back to Fort Dick. Our outfit was scheduled and slated to be in Camp Cook, California. That was going to be where we embarked from for Japan. Anyway, all that was set up. So we, after furlough, we went back to Fort Dick. And then we got out our troop train and headed out to California. And we, in California from, early September. Yeah, it was early September. And they were waiting to be discharged. They had to wait our turn because the service all went by turns, you know.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, I got discharged out there from, sometime in September till around the last week in January when I was brought back from Camp Cook to Fort Dick, processed and discharged the 15th of February of 46.
Well, that was quite an experience.
Right. In Europe, I went through 5 countries, or 6 countries. France, part of Luxembourg, part of Belgium, quite a bit of Germany, Austria, 5 countries. I thought it was 6. Let's see. France, Luxembourg, Holland. We went to part of Holland, too.
I see. All right, so now you discharged, you came back to Hoosick Falls.
Back to Hoosick Falls. I took a couple of weeks off for rest and recreation.
Yeah.
And so I went back to work. I went back at Naval Woods in a foundry. I didn't care for that, so I left that. Then I went to work in Woodlawn for a while. And I didn't care for the paper making. Then I went back in a foundry in North Adams, Hunter's Foundry.
I see.
So I was the last one hired down there. And it was, at that time, work was scarce and work was high. Work was scarce and high. So every time they got scarce on their work orders, I got laid off.
Yeah.
Well, finally one day I got laid off, and I had a chance to go to work at the Naval in Waterford, another foundry. So I took that. I worked there for 10 years. They went on strike, foolishly, but they went on strike. They had 3 different unions in a small shop. So I got a job with Dodge Fibers,
Right.
Cleveland Dodge.
Yeah, right.
They hired me because they wanted to know. They said, "You're working. What happens if you get called back to Waterford?" I said, "If I get called back to Waterford, I stay here if you hire me." So I went to work for them in sometime in 62, and I stayed right with them till I retired in 88.
I see. They sold it, and then it became Alley's.
Oh yeah, it changed hands quite
So
a
who were you
number of
with? Oak, or then you went to Oak, and then
Well,
you went. Who'd you end up with?
First it was Dodge Fibers, then they changed it to Dodge Industries, then it was Oak Material Group,
Yeah.
and quite a bit,
Yeah.
and then Allied Signal got involved
I
there.
see.
And the department I worked in, I ran a big shear in the laminate department for microwave laminate.
I see.
And they took and moved that out to across Wisconsin, and it was either they offered me a job working the last shift or retired. I was 67. I was a month shy of being 67. I said, never mind, I'll quit. I'll retire.
Okay.
So I retired. There
All
I
right.
am.
Now, when'd you get married? I mean, you came home.
Well, I got married. I was 37 years old when I got married.
I see.
41 years ago. 1958. October 11th, 1958, I got married. I never had any children. My wife was married before, and she had a son. So we raised a son.
I see. Great. All right. Now, that told us a good biography of your life. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Hoosick Falls or about the service? I mean, put on tape here. The tape's running. It's yours.
Well, no, except that I volunteered to go with that draft
Yeah,
group.
I see. Yeah, we got that all on.
Uh,
Well, we thank you. It was an interesting story.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah, well, we thank you for coming. It was an interesting story, and we thank you very much.